Welcome to the COVID-19 webinar for farms and markets, presented by Pasa Sustainable Agriculture, hosted by Hannah Smith-Brubaker, Executive Director, and Brian Moyer from Penn State Extension. We've received a lot of calls, concerned calls from farmers and farmers market managers about how COVID-19 is going to be impacting their businesses and how they can be best prepared. So today we are primarily going to address guidance coming out of the Department of Agriculture and from Governor Wolf, as well as some additional guidance that we're providing from PASA and from Penn State Extension, all in alignment with guidance from the Department of Agriculture and the Governor's office, but perhaps some on-the-ground tips that might be helpful. For the most up-to-date information, please refer to the Department of Agriculture, and we've included a link here in our presentation today, or the Department of Health. If you're looking for information specific to essential businesses, we've also included a link for the most up-to-date information on which businesses are considered essential and how to apply for a waiver if you've been asked to close but believe you are an essential business. In terms of an agenda, out of the Department of Agriculture guidelines, we will be covering essential agricultural businesses, farms and on-farm deliveries, farmers markets and on-farm markets, and in part, retail groceries and restaurants. Today, we will not be covering food processors and manufacturers or dairy guidance, but please look for further information from us on these topics. I will start with agricultural guidelines and Pasa recommendations, and then we will move into a presentation by Brian Moyer, who's going to give us further extension recommendations. We will then have general business, human resources, and employee guidance, and then I will be answering a few questions. So starting with essential agricultural businesses. Governor Wolf states essential businesses for a safe food supply include farms, greenhouses, vegetable plants, and orchards. We've included a link to the Essential Agricultural Businesses Guidance document. Essential businesses for a safe food supply, in addition to those I've mentioned, like farms and greenhouses, include pest management services, feed mills, ag supply businesses, agricultural equipment sales and service, animal feed and supply distribution network, transportation system from farm to retail, food and meat processors and manufacturers, veterinary services and supplies, pet food manufacturers and distributors, distribution and transportation system from processors and manufacturers to retailers to include grocery stores and farmers markets, grocery delivery services, and laboratories and inspectors that ensure food safety. We will not be touching on all of these essential businesses today, but rather focusing most specifically on farms, farmers markets, and to some degree where farms are preparing and serving food, as well as farmers markets that are doing the same. Starting with farms and on-farm deliveries, the Department of Agriculture states, as always, it is critical to practice biosecurity for the safety of animals and the public. It is now critical to also consider ways to limit person-to-person contact and congregate in settings of no more than 10 people while maintaining social distance. Again, we've included the link to the farms and on-farm deliveries guidance document. It is recommended that all farms have continuity of business plans to keep operations running smoothly in case of any disruption. PASA and Penn State Extension, in conjunction with the Department of Agriculture, wholeheartedly encourage farms to have a continuity of business plan for illness, for injury, for retirement, and now, unfortunately, we've had to add and pandemics. Think about writing your plan as if someone were replacing you. How would you ensure that your business will continue on with continuity of service? Document all the details of your physical farm, inventory, equipment, key contacts, suppliers, family, and employees, and develop operating procedures for crops, animals, biosecurity, food safety, and human resources. PDA recommends that all farms review and update or write a continuity of business plan in case of disruption due to COVID-19. Continuity of business plans are critical for all operations. However, small farms may be at a greater risk if a disruption occurs because the owner may be the sole caretaker. It is important to have written documentation of your business operations so that another family member or neighbor can assist if you need to be isolated or treated due to COVID-19. Regardless of operation size, production practices, or type of operation, PDA strongly encourages all farms to develop continuity of business plans and communicate that plan to family or another person who can step in, just as you would a will or any associated directives. Make sure that you're incorporating COVID-specific preparedness into your plan. Identify a drop-off location for regular deliveries away from on-farm high-traffic areas and housing, and create signage to easily identify drop-off points. Practice distancing with delivery drivers. Keep a recommended distance of at least 6 feet. Utilize a visitor's log for everyone entering the farm, and monitor personal travel with a personal travel log. Prepare your on-farm workforce by providing guidance for hand washing and handling materials. Inform employees where they can find hand washing facilities and sanitizing materials. All sick employees must stay at home, and we know that this is especially hard for small farms, but it must be done. Encourage employees to avoid large gatherings and to practice social distancing during non-work hours, as we know that everything employees do in non-work hours will come with them to work the next day and impact your business. Sanitize contact surfaces. In particular, disinfect all door handles and knobs, floor mats, steering wheels, and other commonly contacted surfaces. Sanitize common gathering places like lobbies, office spaces, and lunchrooms. For direct market farms, think through each of the areas I'm about to list. This list was adapted from Trumpeter Swan Farm, who did a fantastic job writing out a COVID-19 preparedness document. And that document was shared earlier this week over Small Farm Central's blog. Make sure that you're thinking through supply chain disruptions, social distancing, financial disruptions, team disruptions, member protection, and the toll of cabin fever on your family. And that last one might come across as a little lighthearted, but really it's very important to be thinking about how this is going to affect your family as well. All farms, but especially direct-to-market farms, must take seriously the health of your employees and your customers because of potential contact. Next, we're going to be looking at farmers markets and on-farm markets. If you are relocating a farmers market temporarily due to COVID-19, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture will not need to issue a new food safety license. If it is a permanent relocation, you will need to apply, and the application is on the Department of Agriculture website. Again, I've included the link to the Department of Agriculture's guidance document on farmers markets and on-farm markets. For markets, consider delivery or pickup options. I can't encourage this enough. It's really important if you have the ability to either deliver directly to your customer or have your customer come and pick up something that has already been prepackaged. So wherever you can, prepackaged bags of fruit, vegetables, or other items to limit shoppers' handling of food and to keep customers moving quickly along. Consider alternate locations that could allow drive-through or pickup. Consider putting up signs and information on websites and social media to explain any changes, delivery options, or extra precautions taken to limit exposure to COVID-19. For example, really, truly feel free to instruct customers not to handle any food unless they're planning to purchase it. Consider packaging cheese and eggs ahead of time for customers, even if the cheese and eggs are individually packaged. Open egg cartons for customers to see whether the eggs they're getting are what they want, as opposed to having them open the cartons and have them be handled multiple times. At the market, separate your stands if possible to limit crowds, and try to separate the stands at least 6 feet apart. The Department of Agriculture asks you to please consider limiting the number of customers within your market at one time in the case of panic shopping. If possible, have a different person handle products and money, or wash hands or sanitize in between these tasks. While this is the recommendation of the department, we'll mention a little later that we're actually recommending that you do have someone different handle product versus money at all times. Remember to remove tablecloths and sanitize your tables regularly. Eliminate any sampling. It's important that there's no sampling at this time. Eliminate eating areas and gently direct customers to take prepared foods home to avoid any crowds. And a little later, we'll touch on the guidance for restaurants and for markets serving food, and essentially there should be no dining in at this time. In terms of your employees, remember to provide guidance for hand washing, like time intervals and handling materials. Consider staggering lunch times and provide additional space to increase distancing of employees. Again, all sick employees need to stay at home. Encourage employees to practice social distancing and to avoid large gatherings to avoid risks for potential exposure during off hours. One point that I think is very important is to encourage employees not to handle customers' reusable bags. If a customer brings a reusable bag, please have them put their pre-packed and pre-bagged items into their reusable bag. Employees should not be touching the bag of the customer. In terms of contact surfaces, we are providing some guidance documents coming out of CDC for hard surfaces. Please remember to frequently disinfect all door handles and knobs, credit card machines, shopping baskets. Frequently sanitize common gathering places like restrooms. In terms of retail grocery stores and restaurants, and this would include on-farm retail or food service, the Department of Agriculture states that the service that employees and delivery staff are providing to ensure Pennsylvanians continue to have access to a safe, reliable food supply is critical during the COVID-19 mitigation phase. So for restaurants, even on-farm food service, restaurants should be closed for in-restaurant seated dining and outdoor seated dining, and should be open only to drive-through or other pickup or delivery options. As always, remind employees of best hygiene practices, including washing their hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Increase the frequency of cleaning and sanitizing per the Center for Disease Control and Prevention's Environmental Cleaning and Disinfection Guide by all hard surfaces, including tables and countertops that are being utilized by employees and patrons during pickup and delivery options. In terms of food trucks, remember to increase your frequency of cleaning of menus, cash registers, receipt trays, condiment holders, writing instruments, and other non-food contact surfaces frequently touched by patrons and employees. And in fact, we would recommend that you really have a setup that these types of things are not being touched by multiple people. Ensure that social distancing of 6 feet per person for non-family members is maintained, and make clear that family members can participate together and stand in line together, and limit the number of people in the line. For grocery stores, including on-farm retail, we know that the food distribution chain is critical to the public's health. Grocery stores should remain open and operational, but you may consider altering hours to allow for increased cleaning and restocking. As with other settings, ensure that social distancing of 6 feet per person for non-family members is maintained, and make clear that family members can participate in activities together, standing in line together. Social distancing of 6 feet per person, particularly between individuals who have come together on a one-time or rare basis. Limit the number of customers at any given time as necessary to reduce outdoor or indoor crowding and lines to meet social distancing guidance. Increase cleaning and sanitizing frequency. Train employees on best hygiene practices. Eliminate all indoor or outdoor dining areas and sampling. And stores that have online ordering with outside pickup or delivery options should be encouraged. If you can provide a way for people to order ahead of time and pick up outside in lieu of indoor shopping, this can be very important. Now we're going to be moving into some of Pasa's recommendations. Pasa is asking for every farmer to remember to focus on pre-order, prepay, pre-pack, and then delivery or grab and go. Again, pre-order, prepay, pre-pack, then delivery or grab and go. Think through every step of your operation for how to honor social distancing and implement guidelines for your family, employees, and customers. We're recommending that you perform a COVID-19 preparedness assessment, and Pasa will be working with Brian Moyer from Penn State Extension to develop a preparedness assessment for farms. We encourage you also to develop a continuity of business plan. Again, we're hoping to develop a template for this that touches on many of the areas that we mentioned earlier. Focus on pre-order, prepay, pre-pack, then delivery or grab and go. And try to keep in frequent contact with others going through the same thing. Pasa has a farmer Facebook group, and this is a very important area of conversation right now. Wherever possible, focus on online ordering options, which is another area that we're looking to try to support farmers, and follow our e-news for updates. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Brian Moyer from Penn State Extension.
Thank you, Hannah, and thanks for inviting me to present with you today. I truly appreciate the opportunity. And Penn State Extension, as Hannah said in the beginning, is right in line, lockstep with Pasa's recommendations, which of course follow the CDC and also the Department of Agriculture recommendations. And one of the items I wanted to share with you today that you can get online, you can see the link below here, is these posters. These are, you can download these and print them. We usually have them available at our extension offices for folks, but as you may know, our offices are closed to the public at the moment. This poster shows in both English and there's Spanish versions as well for proper procedure for hand washing. And so you can hang these in the critical areas where you want to remind employees to wash their hands and how to properly do so. Next, please. So some of Extension's recommendations, thinking through some of the details and markets, it's really come to be the opposite of what we had initially design markets to be, right? There's supposed to be these gathering places where the community can come, neighbors could talk, and farmers could sell their wares. Right now, we're just focusing on farmers being able to sell their wares and feed the community. So we're trying anything we can do to not encourage people to hang out and stay at farmers markets. It is really the grab and go scenario, as Hannah was pointing out. And so thinking about how customers can quickly move through your market in a safe way. One of those things we're recommending, I know a lot of markets try this, and it can be really hard to keep people with dogs out of the market, but we're asking that you really make an effort to do so, just because, you know, dogs are a magnet. You know, the people like to pet dogs, they like to see dogs, but you know, I think in this scenario, it's getting one too close to the person who owns the dog as well. So the most we can to keep dogs out of market, unless they are official service dogs, which by law we have to let them. But generally, you're not supposed to touch those dogs anyway. You have a sign that says "Do not pet me." Maybe rethink about not holding a grand. A lot of markets like to have a grand opening for the season. Maybe think of not doing that for this year, or having special events. We like to have family and activities for kids. Let's not have those. Again, we want to just be able to feed the community safely and effectively with the great food we're providing. And no events that may encourage people to congregate. So we can see, like in this method, it's very simple that they've just painted on the street where the folks can move and how they can move throughout the market, and then the dots they can stand on to be safely apart, keeping that social distance from one another and the vendors alike. And then requesting customers send one person from a household to the market rather than maybe making it a family event. If the goal is, you know, to get our groceries for the week, maybe just one person needs to do that and minimize the number of people that are entering the market. And using social media to communicate continuously with your customer base on what the efforts the market is trying to do to keep everybody safe. If you're a meat producer, some things to think about: consider what are your processor alternatives. Should they close if inspector becomes sick or staff becomes sick and that facility has to close temporarily? What are your other options? If you're using a USDA inspected facility, we know they can be fewer and far between, or you may have to travel longer distances. So you may have to figure that into your supply chain. Can you use this as an opportunity to maybe sell more wholes and halves of carcasses or quarters to your customers as, you know, freezer meat? Because as the consuming public at the moment is inclined to want to stock up, this might be an opportunity for you to move some of those. And if possible, that could be more profitable than trying to do individual cuts of meats. And plus, there's a lot more processing opportunities using custom processors rather than USDA inspected processing facilities. U-pick operations, these could be a struggle. Visitors that come to your farm or orchard, can they understand how can they prevent transmission of COVID-19? So we need to have more signs, more distancing. Maybe we're moving everything outdoors. Sometimes U-pick operations have people pick and they come into this market and pay. Maybe just set it up that they can pay outside if you're going to continue that operation. And quite frankly, U-pick operations may diminish somewhat anyway as people are more concerned about going out into public areas. They may not wish to be in a U-pick scenario. They may want to come to your market and get what they need and leave, but U-pick might be something else. And if that's part of your CSA model, that there's a U-pick portion of that, might want to take this time to think about whether we continue that or whether we're going to prepackage that for our customers. So how are customers receive shares in a safe manner? Maybe think about having a drive-through options. There's some CSAs and markets that are thinking in this manner. Some are going to be just nothing but a drive-through model with very limited vendors made up of staple items. And they might be carrying products from all the normal vendors there, but they're trying to limit the number of people that are in that public space as possible. And maybe it's using techniques like one health official had recommended that letting the community know that, hey, if your last name begins with these letters in the alphabet, you can arrive between these times, and using that to stagger the crowds at the market, which I thought was an interesting idea. Delivery not everybody has the capacity to do this, but normal delivery companies right now who are delivering groceries for folks are pretty overwhelmed. In some cases, I heard that one company was saying it was 5 days from the time you placed your order till they could get it to you. So it might create an opportunity for folks to be picking up some of the deliveries, particularly for your shareholders, if that's an option for you. If you're doing any kind of cooperative marketing or collective marketing, right now would be a good time to discuss the production and inventory to determine the capacity to handle potential increases, as we're seeing a great demand at our markets and on-farm markets of folks wanting to purchase from them, concerned about the food supply. Can we meet that demand? And if so, what are we going to be short of, if anything? And then if you're not doing any collective marketing, cooperative marketing, is this an opportunity to do so with some of your neighboring farms where maybe you could reach a wider customer base together that you couldn't do individually? And also, some of our retail farm markets, as I said, are being pretty overwhelmed by customers. They may be looking for product. And if you were currently maybe selling to restaurants and now that restaurant is closed, perhaps there's a retail farm market that is short on product that you could supply them with. And so just want to let you know that there's a webinar that's coming up. This will also be recorded if you're viewing this later. And we'll share with Pasa and also our channels what the recording link for that is. And along with a forum, these forums that we are created, that we had for farmers market managers. It's just a rather informal way to get together and talk about measures that share ideas and strategies with each other on how we're handling the COVID situation. And then on Tuesday, March 24th, we'll have the retail farm market managers forum for folks that have on-farm markets or roadside stands.
Okay, thank you, Brian. We wanted to share a couple or a little bit more information that we've received from other folks as well. There's some additional recommendations from Farm to City and Growing Roots, and they operate farmers markets in southeastern PA. Their first recommendation, again, is that customers pre-order and prepay for producer items. Try to prepay via producer websites, by email or phone. Do not exchange money or credit cards at the market. The only exception to prepayment should be to have a payment box on the table where customers can insert their payment in an envelope. And we're recommending this as well. If you do need to accept payment from customers, provide a way for customers to get that payment into some sort of container or box as opposed to handing it directly to you. Producers should come to the market at their regular time, set up a table next to their trucks with the bagged and labeled orders, establish a way to maintain social distancing of customers by marking lines on the pavement 6 feet apart or only allowing a small number of customers in a space at a time. And then they're actually recommending that you stay in your truck with the windows closed. And I know in discussing with Brian, this is also something that's being practiced by delivery entities as well, just staying in the truck with windows closed, meeting at a meeting place, probably at the end of the farm lane. Customers, one per household, should come to the market to pick up their orders and maintain social distancing and then leave immediately. And customers can communicate with producers via cell phones if issues arise. So try to remember to just make sure all your customers have your cell phone number. It might be a temporary inconvenience in terms of having to answer everyone's calls, but it will really avoid situations where you would unnecessarily have to be in sharing physical space with your customer trying to work out an issue. One last recommendation that they made was actually to think through, if you are a farmer, where you will be able to have access to a restroom. A lot of times farmers are using restaurants for restrooms when they're at market, and with those restrooms closed down, the market manager, if at all possible, might want to try to arrange for a porta potty. To be clear though, personally, I don't think the porta potty should be made available to customers, but rather the farmers at the market, and to be regularly sterilized after use. A few last notes from Simon Huntley of Small Farm Central. He points out that customers are really, really excited about buying from local farms. They want to support their immune systems, and they're being forced to cook at home, and they want to buy from farmers. So these are all things that technically stand to be positive for farmers during this time. Many farmers markets have been closing, although in Pennsylvania, with the clarification from the governor that farmers markets are essential businesses, we hope that they will stay open. But where they are closing, there's a bit of a rush to farmers looking for alternate sales channels. So consider pop-up online sales. With restaurants closed, a lot of consumers are thinking about how to access their food supply in direct-to-consumer outlets from farmers. Start thinking about home delivery if you've not already been thinking about it. Small Farm Central itself offers something called Harvey Farm Stand, which can help. And we'll also be mentioning in our resources a few other online systems that can be helpful. Market style CSAs and farm shares are really not going to work right now. So this idea that customers are going to come to your stand or come to your farm and peruse what you have and touch it and bag it up and pick what they want is just not going to be possible right now. You really need to going to need to think through pre-boxing customer orders, which will rely on pre-ordering. Finally, in terms of topics, we wanted to just quickly talk about the fact that farms are businesses and there are employee considerations. Employees have a lot of protections, as they should, so it'll be important for you as a farm to think through how to be ready. At PASA, we actually did a preparedness evaluation that was based on the survey that was distributed through the Mid-Atlantic Employers Association, and we will also include this in our resources. We thought about things like what steps are we taking to stay informed? And for this, we were thinking about how we have contact with the Department of Agriculture and the governor's office. And then how are we responding to make sure that any concerned members have access to this information as well, which of course is in part the basis for this webinar today. This preparedness assessment covers everything from making sure that your employees have the kind of technology they need to be working remotely, thinking through what sort of paid or unpaid leave it's going to be important for you to be offering employees during this time, flexibility, when there are interruptions that impact your business model, how you're going to rebound from that, how you're going to deal with not being able to travel, and how that, even for a farm, how that might impact those employees who are doing delivery for you. So again, we will include these resources. So overall, please remember pre-order, prepay, pre-pack, then delivery or grab and go. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email us at info@pasafarming.org. If we can't answer your questions, we'll send them along to those who can. In particular, we'll be consulting with Brian Moyer for sure to be able to answer people's market-related questions. You can also join our farmer Facebook group. At this time, I am going to answer a few questions, and Brian, if you don't mind, I might ask for your support in this as well, where it touches on markets. The first question is there any evidence that the virus lives on leaf material for any extended time? I am not aware of this, but this is a question that I am going to refer to the Department of Agriculture, and when we have that question, the answer, we'll pass it along. Are medicinal herbs and essential oil formulations considered a life-sustaining business and therefore able to be offered the same as food to the public? I think I'm going to ask for Brian's support in answering this, but I think as long as you're maintaining proper hygiene and social distancing, this would be considered part of offerings that are considered a essential business from farms. But Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think of it also in terms of a processor. You know, if they're making essential oils and items like that, then I think they fall under processing, which on the governor's list is also an essential business.
Okay, thank you. For CSA farms offering on-farm or choice style pickups this summer, how should we handle our farm members getting their shares? It doesn't seem different than customer shopping at a grocery store produce section, but we want to make sure we're being responsible. Should we make changes? I would say absolutely yes for the time being. We recommend that customers choose ahead of time and customers simply pick up. I would not encourage any sort of perusing or touching of produce prior to purchase. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree, and I don't disagree that it's any that different than grocery shopping. But to your point, Hannah, that it's, you know, if we're taking as many steps possible to be as safe as we can with ourselves, our employees, and our customers, then yeah, the pre-pack is the way to go.
Okay, will you
Your
have a
customers
future
might be
webinar?
uncomfortable with it. If that might be uncomfortable with a more shopping thing, they might actually be more comfortable with knowing they can just pick up a box that hasn't been really touched by a lot of people and go home.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. The next question is, will you have a future webinar to help food processors and dairy operators? We are looking at those guidance documents. Please remember that there are, in the agenda for today, there are links to those specific guidance documents, and we will keep you updated with any information that we get. And we may also refer you to partner organizations, including Extension's food safety recommendations.
Yeah,
The next question, oh, go ahead,
I'm
Brian.
sorry, as we speak, there's folks from the horticulture team, my team of business and community vitality, and a food safety team all working together to, we're going to create, we are creating fact sheets on these various topics too, that will be a special COVID-19 landing place for that as well.
Okay, thanks. The next question is, now we have even more strict orders from the governor. All quote unquote non-life sustaining businesses have been ordered to shut down. We tried to get compost for our life sustaining farm today and the business was closed due to this new rule. Can we convince the governor that in order to grow food, we need access to the appropriate supplies? I know it's a slippery slope, but if farmers can't get access to the necessary supplies at this critical time of year, we will be facing food shortages. Yes, that it's a business that is providing something like compost is considered an essential business and should be able to be open. If for some reason, for some other reason, that business does not fit that essential business criteria, they should rather immediately apply for a waiver. That waiver is also included in the links in this presentation.
I also think
Any
that creates
suggestions?
some misunderstandings, that it might be worth revisiting that business, and they just might have been under the temporary misunderstanding that they were supposed to close.
Okay, next question. Any suggestions on how to limit the number of people in the market at any given time? For example, ticketed entry. And I think, Brian, you did touch on the dots for spacing. Do you want to answer this question?
Yes, and also I've talked to a couple of markets that have enlisted the help of the local police force as just to be there and help manage the number of people coming into the market, and that seemed to be a nice way to partner with that, and was one suggestion that seemed to work well for a couple markets. And like from this photo here, you can see, the idea of just being able to put out markers to keep people properly spaced. And also even barriers, if you're limiting the entrances of how people you can get it to one or place where people can enter the market. Some are using barricades, and you can see also these kind of ropes that really distinguish where people are allowed to be.
Okay, the next question is related to farmers markets. What guidance do you have for markets that use wooden coins for SNAP or EBT and credit and debit payments? Do you have recommendations on how these can be sanitized, or are there alternate systems markets should be considering? I'm wondering, Brian, if this has come up in your panel or if you have suggestions for this.
In our first market manager forum that we had, some folks had a couple suggestions. Ones were not using the wooden tokens at all. They were they basically, market had a central location, which a lot of markets do, for SNAP redemption, and then that's where they usually get the tokens. They were just getting slips of paper to use to redeem with a vendor, and then some were instead of using the wooden ones, we're getting plastic ones. Not our favorite material choice, but it is one that can easily be cleaned and sanitized right after use.
Okay. We are a wholesale greenhouse and many of our customers are landscapers. Can landscapers still go out and work? We are getting many calls and would love to inform our customers. This is one where actually I placed a call to the Department of Agriculture specifically to get clarification on landscapers. And as soon as we hear back, we will include that with the answers we're providing from today. Sanitizers and wipes are currently unavailable. Gloves are on back order. At markets, our employees use bathrooms and restaurants to wash their hands, and this is currently not possible. Please address these concerns. I would suggest that if you can't get hand sanitizer, remember that you can make hand sanitizer with alcohol, rubbing alcohol, aloe vera gel, and optionally something like an essential oil, especially a citrus essential oil. Just remember that you have to have a 60% alcohol to gel ratio. So a good way to remember this is just make sure you have double the amount of alcohol as you do aloe vera gel. Brian, I think you maybe had a suggestion having to do with your health department as well.
Oh, basically, one was saying just not to have, also not to have, like you had said just before, not to having restroom facilities at all. They basically were saying don't drink coffee before you go to the market.
Yeah.
But, if there was another, I forget. I apologize.
That's okay. As you were talking, I think I was remembering, we also had talked about talking to the health department about where to access hand sanitizer. Oh, and then you had mentioned about the distilleries also.
Oh, yes. A lot of distilleries were stopping their production and moving it over to creating hand sanitizer, and because they create alcohol. And in some cases, they were donating it. or it's making it very affordable.
Okay. The next question is, I work for a school farm. It's been a little unclear whether or not we fall under farm since schools in Pennsylvania are currently closed. Yes, if you're feeding people in your community, if you have a farm at a school, you're very likely to be considered an essential business. You certainly could seek clarification from the Department of Agriculture, but I would say that that fits the criteria. Let's see. We had a question about whether certain types of bags are better than others in terms of carrying the virus, brown paper versus plastic versus biodegradable. We did get some information about the virus sort of sticking around on cardboard, and therefore that also might apply to brown paper, but we haven't actually gotten an official answer back about this yet, so we will include that with the answers that come out from today. The next question is, I'm curious about the no dog recommendation. Is this because it slows down the line and discourages public interaction around the dog being at the market? Or is this because domestic animals and farm animals might also be at risk to contracting the COVID-19 virus? There is some, I believe there is some research showing that at least one domesticated dog has contracted COVID-19, but I think primarily it goes back to what Brian had mentioned earlier, that it's really important that pets not be at the market in terms of slowing down people moving through the market or multiple people stopping and petting the dog. Of course, we have to allow service animals, but we just don't want it to be, interfering with the social distancing or slowing down movement. Yeah, dogs are just, unfortunately, everybody loves dogs, and it's not going to help in this situation.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are there any unique considerations for organic farms? And I did just receive something in my inbox to this effect. I don't have access to that right now, but we will make sure that we include that in our here we go. So one is making sure that cleaners, sanitizers, and disinfectants used on food contact surfaces are approved by your organic certifier. In terms of on-site inspections, many certifiers are implementing policies for postponing inspections as needed to protect social distance and make sure sick inspectors stay home. So I would say at this point, anticipate that if you have an upcoming inspection, that will be delayed, and to make sure that your any cleaners, sanitizers, or disinfectants that you're using are approved for organic use. We had a couple questions about crafts at farmers markets and whether those fall under essential or non-essential. Those would fall under non-essential, except for things like essential oils or soaps. Those types of things would be considered essential, but definitely not any sort of craft items that could possibly carry the virus. Let's see. Just looking through for questions that haven't been asked yet. Here's a question about CSA growers and reusable boxes. Even though the CDC has clarified that, for example, it's unlikely to contract the virus through a delivery box, again, we do have that information that it does stick around on cardboard. So I would consider not taking boxes back or using recyclable single-use boxes. If you do have to reuse boxes or take boxes back, I would consider solarizing and maybe for a few days quarantining the boxes. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
That makes a lot of sense to me, Hannah. Also, there is some alternatives coming out to the wax boxes people might be familiar with because those aren't recyclable. Um, there is some newer materials that come out that are recyclable. So if you wanted to use single-use box, there are some alternatives available. And if I get that information, I can pass that along. I just know it from some of the growers meetings I've been at where the auction companies have been looking at these alternatives.
Okay. If someone is sick, I assume all people on the farm would be quarantined until a test confirms sickness being negative or positive. Yeah, if someone in your team falls ill on your farm, likely your whole team is going to need to quarantine. There is small business financial support in terms of at least at a state level being able to help. Unfortunately, I think we're hearing at the federal level that the support may not include farms at this time. Maryland Farmers Market Association and Future Harvest are compiling a list of farmers in the region, including Pennsylvania, that are doing direct buy alternatives to farmers markets. Can we email you the form to share with your stakeholders? We hope to have it live next week. Yes, absolutely, and we're happy to reciprocate as well. Here's a question. I offer product samples by asking customers to use a popsicle stick to take a small sample from my Try Me jars. Would this still be okay? No. No sampling at this time.
And also, again, I'll just reiterate, think about that your customers may not be comfortable with it at this point either. As much as sampling has always been a good idea at our markets to sell our product, but even if we were allowed to do it, people may not want to do it.
Can you address protection for people who are not being paid as employees and are being paid as 1099 contractors? I cannot at this time. This is another thing that we haven't really received any guidance around, whether or not any of the support for small businesses would be extended to 1099 contractors.
Yeah, I had looked as well, along with a colleague of mine had been trying to look into that. He actually wrote an article about unemployment and workmen's compensation in this era of COVID-19. But he has struggles also to find options for 1099 folks, but we're looking into it.
Here's a question. Can the virus be transmitted by dairy products? I'm not going to provide a definitive answer on this other than to say that Secretary Redding in his listening session on Friday said that food products are safe and that we shouldn't consider them as carrying the virus. But we will send this question specifically to the department and to the Department of Health for their input. Next, other than Harvey, are there any online platforms farms can use to help shoppers pre-order? Yes, there's Squarespace, Local Orbit, Oregon Tilth, Food Marketplace, really any website that allows for e-commerce will help. In fact, you really could just use a simple Google Sheet depending on your scale. And if you already accept Square, you can do pre-orders through the inventorying option. And of course, tonight, Brian, your webinar on online ordering and delivery, your panel discussion webinar.
Yes, and also I think if you looked at these companies are seeing a huge increase in demand or curiosity about their products. That if you go to the website, you'll probably notice that they have done webinars on their particular software, so you can see if it's right for your business or not. And in this particular webinar, we had 3 or 4 farm businesses who have been doing this for a while. So it's an idea to hear from the actual users of some of these software products of what works for them and what doesn't.
Okay, We answered this a little earlier, but what about UPIC for CSAs? Do you think we should cancel this? If you have a way for people to go safely through, one at a time, and you're getting a couple people a day, and you're using gloves and or hand washing and mask, maybe I'd probably recommend not doing it. And Brian, as Brian mentioned, it's entirely likely that your customers really aren't going to want to do that anyway. So think about ways to get the products harvested and prepackaged for your customers.
But if it is a major part of your business, like Hannah said, just rethink it and maybe go over it with somebody about how the process is going to work. So then, somebody else can maybe point out, well, maybe you want to consider this, point out things we didn't think about.
Okay. But a question about when wooden vendor stalls, whether they should be sanitized every time. Wood is a tough one to clean versus a plastic table. We're recommending, potentially considering resurfacing the wood by covering it with a washable tablecloth, or actually painting it, or considering trying to use a plastic table where possible. Brian, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, not really, just everything you said, but it's just thinking about the surfaces that can they be cleaned and sanitized well.
Okay, here's a comment. I manage a farmer's market in Ohio. Our plan to sanitize tokens in bulk before and after the market is to heat treat them by baking them at 200 degrees Fahrenheit every day. We use 3 types of tokens, and we will be holding a drive-through market this weekend. Sounds like an interesting option. That's another one we'll probably refer to the Department of Health. But these are, we have to think creatively right now. It seems like that could work, but we'll try to get some input from the Department of Health.
Yeah, I guess the question is whether heat really kills the virus or not.
Right. Yeah. We'll ask the Department of Health about that one. Regarding dairy resources, Center for Dairy Excellence has resources on their webpage specific to dairy in the state and beyond. You do have to scroll to the bottom of the front webpage. NODPA, the Northeast Organic Dairy Producers, also had a webinar regarding COVID-19 and your dairy, and their webpage will hopefully have that recording posted. Also, apparently in this webinar, there's a guidance document. They're providing guidance documents. And then in our webinar from today, in our agenda, there is a guidance document as well.
I think worth pointing out here, since the page is up here, and you did point this out earlier, Hannah, that there's the guidance for farmers markets and on-farm markets, and then also there's the retail grocery. And I would say if you're an on-farm market that has basically built a store, they want to consider looking at both to make sure you're following both guidelines.
Okay. The next question is, can anyone speak to the effectiveness of washing hands with cold water? Often hot or warm water is hard to come by on farms. Yes, according to the CDC, taking the full 30 seconds and the friction with soap is really important. And the temperature of water is not necessarily necessary that it be warm or hot. It's more the friction, the soap, and taking the full time to wash your hands. There's a question, could we still provide porta potties or go without, since people won't be spending a long time at the market? Yeah, I don't think you should be providing porta potties to customers unless you have a strict plan in place for regularly sanitizing. As I suggested earlier, you might want to consider a porta potty for employees, for farmers at a market, for staff, but really you have to have a very strict plan for sanitizing between use as well. Another comment about COVID living longer on cardboard. Is sanitizing gloves the same as sanitizing bare hands? No, I would use clean gloves with I'd use clean gloves each time. I would not try to sanitize gloves and reuse them. Brian, do you agree with that?
Sanitizing really only works after you've washed your hands properly and then sanitized. It's like the best bet you could do, but yeah, not gloves, just replace them.
We have a couple standalone home garden centers in our area selling all types of gardening supplies and transplants. Would these businesses fall under essential ag businesses? I actually had a conversation with the Department of Agriculture about this over the weekend. The garden centers are actually on a case-by-case basis, and you should submit for a waiver if you believe that you are an essential business. Especially if you are providing plant starts, my understanding is that you should be able to get that waiver, but I would call the Department of Agriculture for clarification.
And I've seen them two in my neighborhood do two separate things because they do plant starts. One has moved their plant starts completely outside, so you can't go into their greenhouse or a store. All the purchases are outside, and the other one has done a curbside delivery. I guess they're encouraging the same thing, that people would order ahead. You show up, they give you your plants, and you go on your way.
Okay, great. Next question is, anyone working on a contingency plan in case customers do not attend farmers markets? We hope that employees will attend farmers markets, and at least so far they seem to be quite popular because the grocery stores are so overloaded, and I think because customers are happy to be able to still get fresh product from farmers. As an organization, PASA is working to have a directory, and we will involve other partner organizations. In Pennsylvania, farmers markets are considered essential, and even though they haven't seen a drop in sales, again, we would be encouraging them all to have a continuity of business plan, each farmer to have a continuity of business plan in case there is disruption in being able to sell at the market. The farmers market, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I was just thinking,
okay.
It is an opportunity to look at optional market channels to kind of have in our back pockets in case markets are disrupted and people either can't or stop going, and trying to think creatively about how do we still feed offer our food we're producing to the community. It could be worse if this had hit like in June, when our season was really kicking into full gear. So I feel like even though our season is starting, it still gives us some time to rethink of how our businesses are going to sell our products.
And I think we're pretty lucky here in Pennsylvania, getting the governor and the department putting out these guidance documents so quickly, and making sure that farms and farmer markets are considered essential businesses. I think that has really shown leadership in the region and has meant that some other states have entertained doing the same. I've heard from quite a few other farming organizations in other states that those guidance documents were helpful in their states making the decision to stay open. So that's really positive.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard the same things.
Let's see. We're getting to the end of the questions here. In terms of reusable, should we allow reusable bags or plastic only or paper? I'll let Brian speak to this too, but I'd say if you do rely on reusable containers for CSAs, maybe potentially consider suspending that temporarily and just using single-use bags and boxes.
Yeah, unless there's almost like a HACCP plan for getting those back.
Mm-hmm.
With a way of each step of the process from when you're getting something, how are we cleaning and sterilizing and storing that has to be thoroughly considered if you're going to try to stay with that. But yeah, unfortunately, at this time, I think the recommendation is to use single use.
Okay. We had one person also mention barn to door for online sales, and local line as well for online sales. And there's a question, Brian, whether or not your webinars will be recorded and shared.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
Okay.
We'll make sure that PASA has the link to that as well.
Great, thank you. If you're packing individual bags for farm pickup, can you leave them in a cooler or a walk-in, and how can you minimize people finding their orders? I would say consider putting a person in charge of grabbing orders for customers so that you don't have multiple customers walking into a cooler.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's a way that we can not have that happen. I know of some markets that now have a person that their full-time job is just manning the door to keep 10 or less customers in at a time. So it is requiring extra efforts from our employees and our businesses, but it's really how we have to operate.
Okay. Any thought of petitioning Square or any of these other online ordering systems to reduce or eliminate their fees to make online purchases and payments more affordable for small farms? We are actually looking into that, and we'll keep you posted as to whether we or not we make any progress. And I think that's it in terms of the questions. So we will get all of these questions and answers together and our other resources, and we'll be sharing the actual presentation for today when we share this recording of this webinar. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you, Brian, for all of your input and support. And as we get more information, we'll share it. Thank you.